Good afternoon, everyone. So, we have come together on this online platform due to the pandemic to discuss a course that is meant for your study for MA first semester in paper code 2, a portion related to stylistics. By stylistics, we mean the exploration of language, the understanding of language used as text anywhere. So, more specifically, if you try to relate this use of language, we have to see or analyze the creativity in the use of language. So stylistics becomes a kind of analysis of the text that enriches our ways of thinking about language and thereby allowing us to explore language, offering us some substantial meaning of the usage of language. This origin of stylistics can be traced way back. So it is a new branch of study we understand related to modern linguistics. But this branch of linguistics, which investigates the entire system of expressive resources available in any particular language, is also related to the study of linguistics as a discipline. This word stylistics was first included in the Oxford English Dictionary only in 1882. That refers to the meaning, that refers to the science of literary style, the study of stylistic features. The word stylistics, therefore, can be appropriated to other fields also, apart from simply literary stylistics. It is a scientific way of understanding the use of language in any kind of text, especially the verbal text. In case of stylistics, we have to take into account some facts that are related to modern stylistics or modern linguistics. Among this, we have to consider number one, the speech act as primary rather than the written part. So, any kind of expression, literary expression, or verbal expression should take into account the speech part first, and then the writing comes. Number two, it also talks about the modern way of looking at language in a more scientific, more precise way, irrespective of the biography of the writers. So we have to look at the form as well as content, irrespective of the compositor of the content. So we are not going for psychoanalytic reading of the text or bioliterary reading of the text. We are primarily focusing on the text as it is. So this primacy of the text that is there in stylistics or modern linguistics includes the act of speech or the spoken sound that is there in the language. It also involves other fields that are interrelated to the use of language apart from the sound. So, first, reflection on style can be definitely dated back to the ancient times. We know Aristotle wrote a book called Rhetoric, and in that work, he gave in details how the language can be used in literature. So, ancient rhetoric and poetics are considered to be the predecessors of stylistics, and we have the treatment of style as a specific mode of expression. Any orator or a poet or a rhapsodist during that period, classical period, was expected to follow certain norms, and these norms are even present today. These norms were prescribed by Aristotle in the work Rhetoric, and even in poetics, he makes an argument in favor of imitation of the proper way the people speak, imitation through language. Diction becomes very important in case of poetics. Although diction is the fourth important element in tragedy, in other forms of arts, of course, diction, especially in poetry, constitutes the core. So the orator or a poet was expected to follow certain norms of artful arrangement of words. So this art of arrangement of words involves not only the use of sound, but also the use of appropriate words in a proper sequence that is called syntax. And it should also be related to some kind of meaning. So the arrangement of words, the sentence structure, the prescribed figures of speech, in order to achieve particular expressiveness. So during this ancient period, we have this normative approach towards the analysis of style, investigation of style. In the modern era, especially in the 19th century, mid 19th century, we have some works that talk about the possibility of style analysis in literature. So these works, of course, written by European scholars, was first taken up by a Swiss linguist, Charles Bailly, in 1909. And in his work on French stylistics, he rejected the normative approach to style and developed the modern concept of linguistic stylistics. So, according to Charles Bailly, the subject of stylistics is everything emotional and expressive in language and in speech. So, it became a separate linguistic discipline and began to form in the 20s and 30s of 19th century, of 20th century. In modern linguistics, the term stylistics can be employed in variety of senses. But in general, stylistics is defined as a branch of linguistics which studies the principles and effects of choice and usage of different language elements just for rendering the thought and emotion. We know language is meant for communication, and in order to communicate in a proper way the thought and emotion of a person, different linguistic elements are used. So this object and subject matter of stylistics became very important from the very beginning. Like science, the object of a science, any certain phenomena which exist because of its cognizing or transforming role in the human mind, the subject matter of any scientific subject covers several other given objects. Similarly, in linguistics, we also have a discipline called stylistics that investigates the use of language. This use of language contains different aspects of language. We are familiar with different aspects of language, starting from the smallest to the largest element of language. So we have different aspects of language, and these are to be taken up in understanding of stylistics. So, what do you think is the minimal unit of language, the smallest possible unit of language? Definitely the sound. And sound refers to the phonemes. We know in English RP there are 44 phonemes. Of these 44 phonemes, 20 are vowel phonemes and 24 are consonantal phonemes.
Consonant phonemes.
So this minimal unit called phoneme that is indivisible can then be added to form syllables. In case of syllable, the basic structure is a vowel. One vowel sound is there at the core, and around we have the releasing consonants as well as arresting consonants to form a syllable. Syllable requires a single stream of breath for the articulation, and therefore we have division within words that are bisyllabic or polysyllabic into parts, and these constituent parts are called syllables. For example, in the word pocket, we have paw and ket, two syllables, or water, two syllables. So syllable refers to another small unit of sound that can be expressed or that can be used with the single stream of breath, pulmonic egressive airstream mechanism. Then we have clusters, consonants that come at the beginning of a vowel or at the end of a vowel to form a syllable. These clusters are also used to form syllables. So the phonological variations in language have the segmental features as well as suprasegmental features. And these are also considered in modern stylistics. Although the segmental features define the nature of sound, nature of syllable or clusters, the suprasegmental features add something else to that phonological sound, cluster or syllable in the mode of communication. We know that the English language is highly structured language. It is based on a kind of pattern, a rhythmic pattern is there in language. The accent are all stressed, accented syllables are all stressed, and this pattern that is isochronous, that means equal time gap between two stressed syllables, can be seen in English language. Some syllables remain unstressed, some syllables remain stressed, and there is a proper patterning of these in English language. So the conversational rhythms of speech that is used in literature can also be seen in any kind of stylistic appreciation of a passage of a poetic text. And we have to identify these features that are suprasegmental features, like the metrical scheme, like intonation, the rhyme scheme, the internal rhythm. All these are aspects of phonological study of the literary text. Then we have morphological study, the study of words, and we know that words are formed through several processes like affixation, suffixation, and these word formation, neologism, archaic words, all these contribute to the nature of language. Usually, a poet has to select from a list of words. Some of these words are grammatically obligatory words, so you have to select that appropriate word. And some of the words, like noun, verb, adverb, adjectives, are based on choice of the writer. So, in order to choose an appropriate word, the writer has to work on the structure of the language. So, morphological study is also involved in stylistics. These words are then arranged in a proper order of syntax or grammar. The grammatical arrangement also constitutes the core of literary stylistics because it analyzes how the writer has used or not used the grammatical structures for the proper effect on the mind of the readers. In case of poetry, we have the poetic license. Therefore, non grammatical expressions can also be used in case of poetry. And through such distortion of grammatical syntax, the structure altered by the poet, we have an effective type of communication between the composer of a text and the readers of the text. Every text that is constructed or written artificially must also have some kind of meaning. So, text contributes a lot to the formation of meaning. The analysis of meaning in modern linguistics is called semantics. So, such semantic understanding of the text is also required in stylistics. The fourth area for the analysis of the text is the graphological imprint on the text. It's also an important area. So when we have a text before us, we have the visual representation of text, either in handwritten writing or in a typeset or in the virtual ICT text. So we have the impression of the text, and through the interpretation of the symbolic alphabets and text, we have the understanding of the language. So we produce the sound based on the print, the typographical print or the handwritten print that is there on the text. So this interpretation of the graphological or the graphics of the text has also been included in stylistics. Further, we also have the analysis of the way the writer is trying to communicate, the narrative structure, how the narrative is shaped according to the requirement of the text. So this is an area called pragmatics that is also included in stylistics. We also have semiotics, the study of the sign language that we find in case of any kind of stylistic analysis. So stylistic analysis in a way is a holistic way of reading at the text on the basis of the minimal unit, the phonological, then the morphological, after that the syntactical, then the semantic, after semantic the pragmatic, and overall there is the graphological imprint on the mind of the readers. Then there is the process how the text is told, the pragmatics of the text. So don't get confused with all these because these are simply terms that you are already familiar with, and some of these terms that you are going to know about these. But most of this stylistic aspect is also based on the normative approaches, the classical historical approaches that we called usually rhetorian prosody. So rhetorian prosody also constitute an important part in literary stylistics. Apart from that, we have the analysis of imagery, analysis of symbols, analysis of the words that are not there in the text but suggested through the text. So filling in the gap between the written text, we have to construct the meaning. So meaning formation is closely related to the formal elements of a text. So stylistics therefore includes the analysis of the text as it is on the basis of its formal structure as well as on the basis of its content. There are two broad schools in stylistics that talk about the analysis of the text based on form and content. So, if any attempt is made to separate the form from the content, the type of stylistic analysis that we get is called dualism. So, in modern stylistics, the word dualism refers to the analysis of the text, separating the form from the content, content from the form. These two are separated and analyzed. So, first analysis will be on the form, after that, the analysis may be on the content. So, this type of analysis has been called as dualism or dualistic analysis. On the other hand, in modern stylistics, we have a more preference based on what Russian formalists and modern linguistic criticism has proposed to take form and content together in the analysis of text. This type of analysis is called monism, where we have the combination of the formal and the contextual elements together in the text. So, such a monism is possible when we look at the form as the vehicle of content and the content as the contained matter in the form, where form becomes content and content becomes form. There is no kind of separation between form and content. So, by focusing on these two approaches, we can come to a kind of understanding of a literary text. So, first, if we focus on the form, analyze the form properly, the content will get revealed through the analysis of the form. Similarly, when we analyze the content in a proper way, scientific way, naturally the form or the appropriateness of the form will get revealed through the analysis. At the center of the entire stylistics, we have another word, keyword, that is called foregrounding. So, foregrounding is a very important word in modern stylistics. By foregrounding, we generally mean the putting of some linguistic elements into prominence against a backdrop of languages. Okay, in ordinary conversation, for example, in this classroom conversation, I am using a lot of language, but these are not simply literary language. Rather, it's a lecture mode where I am delivering a topic, a subject matter. And while delivering the subject matter, I am emphasizing on certain words, words like foregrounding. So when I put prominence on these words against the backdrop of language and try to make an impact on the mind of the listeners or the readers, I am actually practicing the stylistic foregrounding. So this foregrounding is done through various devices. Art is always seen, literary art is always seen as an artificial effort to foreground certain linguistic elements or bring some linguistic elements into prominence by drawing the attention of the readers, arresting the attention of the readers or listeners to those prominent linguistic items against a backdrop of language. So this word foregrounding actually emerged from the school of Russian formalists, mainly the linguists of Moscow linguistic circle or Prague linguistic circle, and later on it was accepted by the American linguistic circles in order to investigate the nature of language, especially the language that is created in order to effect on the mind of the readers. The most effective is the language which reveals so many things within the linguistic item. So this forceful representation of a language through a kind of formal irregularities or deviation actually actualizes the linguistic content. So this has come from a Czechoslovakian word, actually say, where we have the actualization of a linguistic item through artificial stylistic process. So this actualization later on was related to a kind of effect on the mind of the readers and later on translated into the word foregrounding. So this foregrounding becomes a core. So at the beginning of our stylistic analysis, we have to look at both the form and content, how the content is presented to the readers through formal innovations in order to arrest the attention of the readers. Most remarkable lines that we still remember of any poet or any dramatist or a novelist are those lines where the most effective foregrounding has been done. For example, the opening sentence of Jane Austen's novel Pride and Prejudice. So it begins with an ironic comment where the entire subject matter is foregrounded in such a manner where we have the discrepancy between appearance and reality foregrounded. So the writer begins the novel with a statement that it is a truth universally acknowledged that a man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. So this concept of this unmarried man in possession of good fortune wanting a wife is simply inverted as soon as we find Mrs. Bennet worried about the marriage of her daughters and putting her daughters in this marriageable market for the acceptance of a rich husband. So the ironic contrast is revealed through the opening sentence. Similar opening sentence strikes our attention, especially in, say, James Joyce's novel, The Portrait of an Artist is a Young Man. So it begins with the sound or prattle of a small young boy, and it begins with a narrative style replicating the folkloric narration, once upon a time narration. So once upon a time there was a small baby Tuku who could only say cuckoo, cuckoo. So the narrative begins in that way, arresting the attention of the readers. Similarly, in case of drama also, you remember the dialogues of the films or the plays more because these dialogues have something special in them. By foregrounding some linguistic elements through some kind of process, stylistic process, the writer is capable of imprinting on the mind of the audience. The proper way of such representation can be seen in the most stylized of languages. Say a statement like, I came, I saw, I conquered. Okay, so we have the figurative speech of climax in this section, and such figurative use of language can also be seen in such stylized linguistic expressions throughout literature. Poetry is a special case where we have the most effective way of foregrounding things because of its brevity of form, compression and concise nature of its structure, and because of its poetic license and effectiveness. Poets throughout the world, they have worked on different patterns in order to reproduce some kind of expression that are almost lyrical, musical, metrical, in order to capture the mind of the attention. So it is easier for us to remember the lines of the songs, lyrical lines that imprint on the mind of the readers. So William Shakespeare might write sonnets. So many sonnets he has actually written. But among these sonnets, the lines that we remember are actually those lines that have the most effective use of such foregrounding devices. For example, in the famous sonnet, When to the Sessions of Sweet Silent Thought, he has patterned the sound sir in order to create a kind of sonorous, reflective mood in the mind of the readers. So the use of alliteration was very common during the metrical medieval romances, composition days. Similarly, in the Elizabethan period also, we have the use of several rhetorical devices to imprint on the mind of the readers. Even in the Romantic period, most of the poems that we remember now, we remember them because of the effectiveness with which the poet has used the lines and expressions in order to arrest the attention of the readers. So this stylistic foregrounding works on a kind of distortion or anomaly that serves an aesthetic purpose. So stylistics is a study of such distortion and deviations, study of such patterning and innovations in language that the writer makes in order to understand the inner content of the text. Say when we have a poem like Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, begin in very casual way. Let us go then you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky, like a patient etherized on a table. So we have such kind of informal conversational language or discourse where the narrator takes the center stage, dramatizes his position, and then keeps on including several micro narratives in the statement in order to foreground what the central content of the poem is. So, stylistics is basically critical appreciation of the text based on the linguistic constituents of the text. Among these linguistic constituents of the text, we have first the overall imprint that marks on our mind. We call this graphological analysis. So, you can just keep this in mind. Number one, first we have to take the graphological imprint in our mind. Number two, the phonological analysis. Number three, the morphological analysis. Number four, we have the syntactical analysis. Then we have the semantic analysis, the analysis of meaning of a text. Then we have the semiotic analysis, the interpretation of metaphors and symbols. Then we have the pragmatics. Pragmatics refers to who says what, to whom, and how the narrative is made. Pragmatics. So all these features that we have in any kind of literary composition can be stated to be based on two axes. Number one, the axis of deviation from the ordinary common day language that is kept in the background. The writer selects certain items, certain linguistic items, in order to foreground those into literary prominence. So there will be a deviation from the ordinary conversational language, and after this deviation, there will be also the patterning of the language according to the requirement of the writer. So we have these axes of deviation and patterning for effective foregrounding in stylistics. For our stylistic analysis, we have to therefore look for the instances, examples of such deviations, examples of such patterning, in order to understand how effective the foregrounding is. So our comment will be universal analysis of the text based on certain principles, the principles of how the writer has altered the existing or pre-existing language, use that language by pushing the word, pushing the expression to its limit, creating a new type of language in order to produce verbal effect on the mind of the readers. So literary text marks this distinction because in literary text or any kind of advertisement text, this verbal medium is used for the maximization of prominence. So any kind of linguistic element that is brought into prominence through deviation, through patterning, captures the attention of the readers. Say, for example, in Samuel Taylor Coleridge's poem, when the mariner is stuck in the wide sea, Coleridge the poet describes the ship as a painted ship on a painted ocean. Because there is the absence of air, the entire ship is stuck. Then there is the rising of the sun. The sun is very hot. In order to describe this hot sun, the writer writes, nor dim, nor red, like God's own head, the glorious sun uprist. So here we have the foregrounding of the arrogance of the sun through such coloration and selection of words. So I repeat the lines, just try to identify the kind of stylistic innovation that the writer has done. Nor dim, nor red, like God's own head, the glorious sun uprist. First, we look at this word uprist, U-P-R-I-S-T. This word was not common, neither it is an archaic word. So it was never used earlier. So we have rose, risen, uprise, these words were there. But the sun with wrath and fury has come up on the sky. There is water everywhere. The mariners are very thirsty for water because they cannot drink the water of the sea. It is scorching heat. And in order to represent the arrogance of the sun, as the mariner has actually killed an albatross, killed one life. So nature is trying to take revenge on the mariner. And then the mariner writes, or Coleridge writes, water, water everywhere. All the boards did shrink. Water, water everywhere, not any drop to drink. Once again, here we have a foregrounding. So there is lots and lots of water. Okay, and there is immense scarcity of water. So this immensity of water is represented through the repetition of the word water. So if you see from the perspective of a poet, so poet is seeing water on all sides of the ship. It is like a painted water, and on that painted water we have a painted ship. So we have no sail, no movement of the ship. The sun has come up, very hot, arrogant. The mariners on the board are all parched, thirsty for water. The heat of the sun is so enormous that the poet is trying to represent that, foreground that through this description of the ship. So, water, water everywhere. All the boards did shrink because of the heat of the sun. Water, water everywhere, not any drop to drink. So, this enormous water and the scarcity of water juxtaposed together in the single expression, thereby making the lines very forceful. So here we have the repetition of the word water. So water is uncountable, we understand. So we can count the quantity of water. The measuring yard is liter, gallon. Here the poet is not using that. Simply he is repeating the word water twice or 4 times in a sequence. So alternative lines have water, 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 water. So where we have the enormous water body, the sea, described through the repetition of the word water. In William Blake's poem, you remember, very common poem you have all read, Tiger, Tiger, Burning Bright. You must have noticed the spelling of the word tiger. What type of spelling is that? Tyger. And Tyger is definitely not the Tiger that we commonly used. In Bible, how of course, this Asiatic animal that was not popular in the European countries has been described with the spelling, archaic spelling Tyger. So why has Blake selected the spelling that is obsolete, that is biblical, in a text that is English? Modern text, he is composing this around 1790s. So it is a composition where we have the use of an archaic word, Tyger, and that too not once but twice. So go through the lines. Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forest of the night. What immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? So I should rhyme with try, but here it is tree, symmetry, not try. So this is a half rhyme. This is not a complete rhyme. Symmetry is pronounced with the sound at the end, E sound at the end. That phonological deviation is not seen in the first 2 lines. But here we have a phonological deviation. Why is the poet consciously trying to foreground such discrepancy? So the point is that in foregrounding, effective foregrounding, there is a deviation from the norms. And then there is a patterning of the deviant linguistic items. I just give the example of the word water. Water has been repeated twice in order to show the large quantity of water, the sea. In this poem, how many tigers did the narrator talk about? The narrator is talking about a single tiger or 2 tigers. Why is he using the word tiger twice? So it is primarily for metrical sake. So it must replicate the sound of a child like rhyme or rhythm in order to arrest the attention of a child wondering at the beauty of the tiger, like the small children who were taught, twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. So what about this composition, twinkle, twinkle, little star? How many times the star did twinkle? Is it just twice? Or the continuity of the twinkle is there, suggested through the word twinkle, twinkle, repetition of the word twinkle at the beginning. One of the disciples of William Blake composed this nursery rhyme, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. And we find that this Twinkle Twinkle Little Star almost has the same type of rhyme scheme or rhythmic structure, metrical structure, trochaic structure that we find in the poem Tiger, Tiger Burning Bright in the forest of the night. What immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? You must have also observed that in our ordinary day to day speech, although we speak English in a rhythmic manner, but such rhythmic structure is not totally replicated in case of poetry. Poetry is constructed by structuring the patterns of the colloquial rhythmic structure so that more effective impression, lyrical impression, phonoaesthetic impression can be put on the mind of the readers. So we have a conscious patterning of language. Although William Wordsworth was there to say that there is no essential difference between the language of prose and language of poetry. When you write prose in an excellent manner, it becomes poetry. He talks about the process of filtration of language. While saying that I will be using language really used by man, he said that he will also be filtering the language and keeping some residual languages outside the text. And when we put such aesthetically purified language in the text, in a prose style also, we can have the possibility of poetry in text. So with this view, Wordsworth had composed his own poems. He remembers his famous poems like, say, the Immortality Ode, that is almost prosaic at the beginning, without any kind of rhyme or rhythm that is apparent in the text. So in the prosaic style, he begins the lines like this: there was a time when meadows, birds, and groves, the stream, and every common sight to me did seem, apparelled in celestial light, the glory and freshness of a dream. It is not now, as it hath been of yore, turn wheresoever it may, by night or day, the things which I have seen I can see no more. The rainbow comes and goes, and beautiful is the rose. The moon doth with delight look around her when the heavens are bare. Waters on a starry night are beautiful and fair. So he's using almost a prosaic rhythm. Even John Keats, in his famous Ode to Nightingale, uses this same prosaic rhythm, but to perfection. My heart aches and a drowsy numbness pains. My sense as of hemlock I had drunk, or emptied some dull opiate to the drains. So it appears as if the poet is speaking in ordinary prose, conversing with the readers in a confessional manner. There is a possibility of a kind of spontaneous overflow of powerful feeling that, of course, takes its origin, as Wordsworth stated, from emotion recollected in tranquility. Coleridge objected to this view of Wordsworth in his famous Biographia Literaria and stated that there is an essential difference between the language of poetry and language of prose, because poetry is metrically composed. If you take out meter from poetry, according to Coleridge, it will not create a kind of sensationalism through linguistic utterance. It will not produce the proper lyrical effect on the mind of the readers. And then he said that even Wordsworth has been doing so, although he has been using a language that is prosaic, yet the prosaic language is metrically composed. And without the use of that metrical composition, iambic, trochaic, anapestic, or dactylic composition, we cannot have a proper poetry. Think of Wordsworth's poems that are written, say, Lucy poems, or say, The Solitary Reaper. Almost these are prosaic poems, but when you see the structure of the poems, you will find that even in his poems and lyrics and odes, he has used the metrical structure. You cannot say that these are non-metrical poems. There's an inner rhythm in the poem. So through this phonological, morphological, syntactical, semantic structures, we have an effective foregrounding on the mind of the readers. So this kind of deviation from the norm, from the ordinary language, and the patterning of the ordinary language, these two are to be taken for an understanding of the stylistic contents in our stylistic analysis. So up to this, any questions if you have, you can raise questions. I can address those questions. If you have any question or query, you can ask, then I will proceed. So let us just recall what we have discussed today. Point wise, let us recall. First, I stated that stylistic is a modern type of analysis of the text, although it has its roots in the tradition, the classical rhetorical study. Therefore, rhetoric and prosody both are also part of stylistic analysis. Second, I stated that stylistics will look only at the text, irrespective of the psychology of the writer or the biography of the writer. It will try to make a practical criticism, a kind of understanding of the text. I also mentioned the two ways the text can be seen. One, by separating the form from the content, called dualism. The other, by taking both the form and content together for the analysis of the text, called monism. Then I referred to the effective use of the different components of stylistics, starting from the graphological, then the phonological, morphological. After that, we have the use of the syntactical, then we have the semantic. After semantic, we have the use of the symbols, the semiotic analysis, then we have the pragmatic analysis. So these are the different aspects of analysis of text. Then I referred to the central notions of modern linguistics that has its origin from Moscow Linguistic Circle and Prague Linguistic Circle, called foregrounding. That means the actualization of the linguistic items to bring forward in the foreground certain linguistic items, and by bringing them into prominence, reveal the content in an effective manner by arresting the attention of the readers. So this, I said, is done on the basis of the axis of deviation and the axis of patterning. The writer usually selects certain words by deviating from ordinary linguistic conversation and then tries to pattern that in an artificial manner in order to create a style, a fashion, a design to represent the content. And finally, I came to the conclusion that all the creative artists, irrespective of the genre they are practicing, they are all artificial stylisticians of language. Stylistics is a branch of study that will look into the ways such stylistic devices are used and what is the purpose of such use. How far has the writer been able to reveal the content through the form? Yes, any question, please? The house is open now. No questions?
So,
Yes.